Thank you so much. So I'm from Fortem, Australia, a new organisation that's been established since October last year. It's built on an organisation I helped set up that supports veterans and their family members here in Australia called Soldier On. Since we've started, we've supported police and emergency services in the vicinity of about 1,300 people since October, providing a range of wellbeing and health programs here in Australia, and hopefully one day also over the ditch. And we'll get to hear more from Mel soon about what New Zealand is doing, which is really, really exciting. I'm lucky to know a few of the people who are on this panel, and it's going to be really exciting to hear some of their approaches towards wellbeing and resilience for police. So without any further ado, today's session is Innovative Approaches to Police Resilience and Wellbeing. I'd first like to introduce Dr. Katrina Sanders, who is the Chief Medical Officer of the Australian Federal Police, who is presenting on officer wellbeing in long-term crisis. Over to you, Katrina.
Thanks very much, John. It's wonderful to be here today, and I've had the opportunity to listen to some of the other panel presentations, and I found it quite interesting. So my opening remarks are, as John said, I am the Chief Medical Officer for the Australian Federal Police. That means I'm not a psychologist. It means I'm a doctor. And I think it's important for us all to remember about the link between mental health and physical health, and the overwhelming research that you cannot be 100% fit and healthy mentally if you don't have your physical health up to scratch, and vice versa. So I want you to keep that in mind today as I talk a little bit about the AFP. I don't want to talk too much about all of the initiatives we have, but rather focus a little bit more on long-term crises and a framework that you can take away for yourself and your organisation on really how to protect your health during long-term crises. The previous presentation spoke a bit about bushfires. So just by way of context, Australia entered its most catastrophic bushfire season in September last year, and we refer to it as Black Summer. And we didn't really come out of Black Summer until about March, which is when we were entering the coronavirus pandemic, the same as everyone else around the world. And this required a significant and sustained effort over a period where people should be holidaying, and they should be catching up with their friends and their family, and they should be resting and having respite and reflecting on the year that was. But of course, that's not what happened. And this is an extraordinary level of demand placed on individuals and organisations during these kind of long-term crises. And they're a bit like running a marathon. For those of you that have run a marathon, you'll be surprised to know that I'm not a marathon runner. But for those of you that have run a marathon, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is not just a long run. There is different terrain. The weather changes. Your mood changes. There are periods where you must accelerate and periods where you will decelerate. And that's exactly the same for an organisation and a team during a long-term crisis. And a lot of this can cause what we call stress. And stress is normal. It is a normal human response, but when it becomes long-term, it can impair us. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about chronic stress and stress in response to long-term crises. What I just want to say from the outset is that we will all agree there are a number of factors that are critical to supporting people in long-term crises, like leadership and resourcing and respite and the right level of rest. I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm going to take it as a given that we all agree on those given time, but I am going to talk a little bit about a framework for long-term crises. So let's just remind ourselves, acute stress. Stress is a very normal, healthy human response, which is exactly what we want to occur in those dangerous situations. It's part of our fight and our flight mechanism. The hormone is released from our hypothalamus. It acts on our pituitary gland, and cortisol is released. And all of you know what that feels like. It increases your heart rate. It increases your blood pressure. It increases your blood sugar levels. It decreases your reproductive processes, it decreases your gastrointestinal processes, and it can have an impact on your immune system. And this is all normal. And then you rest and your cortisol levels go down. But during a long-term crisis, this isn't exactly what happens. And that cortisol level can remain elevated. and it can have significant impact on your health. And in fact, we know that long-term cortisol can cause heart problems, headaches, sleep disorders, poor concentration, poor memory, heart disease. The list goes on. So we know that chronic stress is linked, chronic stress can have an impact on our brain, and it changes certain parts of our brain. And this results in cognitive, emotional, and behavioural dysfunction. And in fact, we know that chronic stress can result in a chronic low-grade inflammation. So I want you to think about your ankle. You've rolled your ankle at indoor soccer, and you're doing, of course, everything the doctor has asked you to do: rest, ice, compression, elevation, and that inflammation goes down. Now, if you don't get to rest and you don't get to apply ice or compression, then the inflammation doesn't quite go away, and you have this chronic low-grade inflammation in your ankle that predisposes you to further injury. And you know what chronic stress looks like in people. We know that decision-making processes are affected. We revert to a very rigid, habit-based, processed type of system. And you've seen that. You've seen that in individuals who are chronically stressed. What you need to remember is that instinctively the brain wants to protect itself. It goes into survival mode with these long-term levels of cortisol. So the brain wants to protect itself. It socially withdraws. It doesn't want to engage in physical activity. Your fatigue levels change, your mood levels change. And this is all about staying away from normal activity to save energy and to protect your brain. So we know that chronic stress affects the brain. We know that it leads to inflammation, which can cause immune imbalances and diseases, and can have an impact on both physical and psychological health. So what do? I bet if all of you stopped and thought about what you do in response to short-term crisis or critical incidents, you would know exactly what you do. You pause. You might debrief. You might rest. You might investigate and debate the measures that were adopted, and were they proportionate and appropriate, and were they consistent with training? Well, what about long-term crises? What about when you roll from Black Summer into coronavirus and beyond? So I want to reiterate here, there is a role for leadership and resourcing and all of those very important organisational structures. But what I want to talk to you today quickly about is a public health intervention at an individual and an organisational level that can get you through these long-term crises. Now, these are well researched in public health literature, but perhaps we don't apply them too regularly. So primary prevention is all about preventing disease. Secondary prevention is detecting it early and preventing spread. And tertiary prevention is all about improving the quality of life in those that have disease, or at least preventing severity of symptoms. So if you take this very simple framework and you apply it to an individual and to an organisation over a long-term crisis, you get great health outcomes. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're talking at the individual level and we're talking about primary, secondary and tertiary interventions. So primary, to prevent ill health, you've got to diet, exercise, sleep, repeat. Diet, exercise, sleep, repeat. That's what you need to do at an individual level in a long-term crisis to prevent ill health. At a secondary prevention level, you need to be able to detect the signs of ill health in yourself and make adjustments early. And at a tertiary level, you need to know where to reach out for help. Now, if we apply these same principles to an organisation, you might say that the primary prevention level in an organisation is to educate people about the signs of ill health, which would mean that the secondary level of prevention would be about educating people on where to get help. And the tertiary prevention level might be you telling your people that you will reach in. So you're asking them at their tertiary level to reach out for help. But at a tertiary level for an organisation, you're saying, we will reach in. And this in itself is a health protection factor. So at the AFP, through Black Summer and the coronavirus pandemic, like all of you, we've had a suite of initiatives to support the health and wellbeing of our organisation, from primary prevention, such as fact sheets and videos, and secondary prevention levels, hotlines and internal contact tracing and early testing, and tertiary prevention about direct wellbeing support and reaching into people from the right health professional at the right time. This is a very simple framework that you can take away and you can apply both to yourself and to your organisation. It won't prevent all ill health, but what it does do is give you a framework to work around. It means that you do not have to massage or tinker with your critical incident response, which just doesn't work in a long-term crisis. So as many of you, and certainly us here in Australia, move into our next bushfire season, and who are not yet well clear of this pandemic, this framework will become ever more relevant and necessary in protecting your own health and that of the people in your organisation. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to you, John.
Thanks so much, Katrina. That was really fantastic. From all of that, could you just leave us with one takeaway that I guess sums up that presentation on chronic stress, especially in this current time with the pandemic, and from the Australian and New Zealand perspective, the recent Black Summer fires?
John, the one takeaway I have for chronic stress and long-term crises is you need a framework to deliver your support. And the framework should be tiered: primary, secondary and tertiary prevention. And although today you might only need to apply your secondary prevention measures, be prepared to surge to tertiary, be prepared to return to primary. But that framework will protect you and your organisation.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Little wonder that we have you on our advisory board. We're really lucky to have you present today, and from our perspective, just lucky to be able to connect with your expertise and knowledge, and the AFP is in good hands. Next, we'll be hearing from Chief Constable Andy Rhodes, who's the Lancashire Police UK and National Police Chiefs Lead for Wellbeing. Andy is presenting on Oscar Kilo, the National Police Wellbeing Service of the United Kingdom, and joins us at a very warm and wonderful 2 a.m. over there. Andy, over to you.
Morning, John. Morning, everybody. Hi, Katrina. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, real privilege to be here today. I have a force of my own of 6,000 people in the Northwest, as you say, John, and Oscar Kilo services approximately 200,000 law enforcement and fire personnel across the UK. I'm going to talk today about some innovation, I think, that came out of some discussions I saw actually on social media recently, where people were sort of saying, you know, why are we doing wellbeing strategies because it's an antidote for a badly run organisation? Are we doing resilience training just so it can cope with things like organisational stresses that actually can be avoided? And how do we tap into understanding at a deeper level in our organisations exactly what's going on at the front end of the organisation that sometimes for those people feels like we're doing everything that's detrimental to their resilience and well-being. And you know, when I was listening to the amazing Mr. Seligman on Jeff's Symposium recently, that is, you know, his work has defined actually how we've taken the approach forward in the UK. Because if you look at the PERMA model, you know, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, engagement with what you're doing at work is very closely linked to well-being. We know that, it's proven. So how do we go around linking those two things together to make sure that our organisations actually don't force us into a position where resilience and well-being are seen by the workforce as things that are done to them rather than co-produce with them. I'm just going to share one of my favourite images here, if I can. Now, this is called the iceberg of ignorance. This sometimes upsets senior people like me because this is where I am, and you cannot convince senior people in an organisation that they don't actually know what's going on down here. And we always see, whenever we do any diagnostics in organisations around change or well-being, we always see a yawning gap between these two communities of people. The executive, therefore, who are leading and investing in wellbeing strategies can sometimes get themselves into a position where they're spending money on the wrong things. The frontline think that they don't understand them. They don't realise what's actually going on for them. And, you know, in all my years of leading wellbeing over in the UK, I've never yet had a police officer or member of police staff complain to me about the nature of their work, the trauma, the type of difficult situations they deal with on a day-to-day basis. What they will complain about is the printer not working. And, you know, the filters here in the C-suite teams prevent bad news escalating between the frontline and the executive. And I think what I like to talk about with people, therefore, John, is what is it that we're trying to do in an organisation to make sure that we can get those insights rapidly to the executive from the front line, so that we're tuning in our wellbeing strategy to the things that matter to people on the front of the organisation. I think this is really important. And, you know, it's tough for leaders. It's a really tough experience for leaders. You know, if I can show you, this is a sort of example of a diagnostic from my own force. You know, we've been running these for 6 years now. And, you know, we're getting well over 50%. So you're talking 3,000 people filling these in. You know, I can actually look here at an area of Lancashire. This is a map of Lancashire. These are my operational bases. And I can see places where things send me for further inquiry. You know, this is, the survey is just one of multiple channels that you've got of staff engagement that's running all the time. But the depth of this survey can look at different departments. And, you know, when you look and start comparing in a very sort of transparent and open way, you know, we're not judging people here. You can very quickly start to see differences in responses to organisational stresses. Predominantly, these issues tend to be around a great line manager is doing a good job up here, and we may have lost a sergeant or something like that that was doing a really good job for the team. They may have gone through a series of traumatic incidents. They might be in the middle of some sort of technical change program where they're struggling with the IT because of the age profile of the people on the team. So we must never underestimate the fact that change causes huge stress in an organisation. And what I like to talk to senior people about is almost having a trauma-informed lens when you're delivering change in your organisation. Because we know, don't we, just how much trauma our people experience and are subjected to. And as a result of that, the behaviours that they have, in response to change can sometimes be extreme. You know, we often see an individual tipping over the edge when something that appears to the executive to be quite a minor issue around change happens to them. So if we're involving people in some of these decisions, we actually have got to the point now where we can tell exactly what things need to be done in order to shift those different perspectives. This is a snapshot. What you've got here is PERMA, high objectives and purpose, 92%, high pride, high purpose in their work. When you come down here, we've got a feeling that only 23% of people say we're taking action. 62% here. How are we managing change in the organisation? But you can see that we've got significant increases in these areas. That's because with longitudinal analysis of engagement data like this, you can start targeting your OD interventions and lift the areas up where people are saying you're not doing well enough. And it's a pretty challenging experience for senior leaders. You've got to support the senior leadership to do this work, because it's a humbling experience, being open to listening to your staff 24/7. So one of the things that I think is our approach in the UK, what we've managed to do here is look at the juxtaposition between the executive, academic and research, and employee voice. This is the sweet spot, folks, here, where, for example, the executives matter as well, don't they? We're all stressed. We often feel we don't get understood by our front line. So we've got a evidence-based self-assessment based on Public Health England's guidelines that's tuned into law enforcement, that's done by Dr. Ian Hesketh, who I know was speaking on an earlier seminar. And that's academia helping the executive. At an organisational level, this is what good looks like. But this bit here, the employee voice, is vitally important to feed into the other two areas. I'll give you an example of our National Wellbeing Service survey we've just done, 35,000 staff. The thing that left off the page was fatigue. Very quickly, academics linking with the executive and practitioners on the ground to come together to identify what works. And they reach out to the community of, Jeff, Katrina, all the people that are in Ian Hesketh's and Oscar Kilo's community. We know that people in Australia, Canada, the States have done a huge amount of work on fatigue, far more than we have. And we can reach out to them, find out what works, but we can rapidly bring it into play in the workplace. And the important thing is that our people feel their voice is being heard. It is really stressful to work in an organisation to feel that you've got low autonomy, low influence over what's going on, and that the executive are making decisions that seem a million miles away from your lived experience. So I think, from our perspective, learning from our mistakes over the last 10 years, the open channels that we've got around engagement really do legitimise what we're trying to do about wellbeing. People don't expect you to fix this stuff. The nature of the work isn't going to change. So what is it that we can do to open up those channels and those networks? Because your workforce is communicating all the time between itself. On Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, these are social networks that the executive are not invited into. And you can get a sense of what the conversations really are in your organisation, even across a population of people as big as 200,000. And, I think they're therefore, that builds trust. It builds a sense of, feeling as though people care about you and that you're responsive and agile rather than waiting, several years before you actually go and provide an intervention to people. So it's about putting research into practice, John. It's about relentlessly listening through multiple channels of engagement all the time and being able to respond very quickly. Just yesterday, I've got an online forum called Buzz. It gets a bit tasty, I have to say. Some days I want to throw my computer desktop across the room because some angry person vents about what's not going right. And they were absolutely livid that we haven't got enough Perspex screens in. Where are the Perspex screens? What are the executive doing to protect us from coronavirus? And that for me is very rapidly giving me a sense of that conversation's about to catch fire. And it will lead to a lack of trust, a lack of belief, but it's also a risk management issue. Sometimes in my organisation, I ask for something to be done and it doesn't get done. The front line will tell you if you open the channels up, and they'll hold you to account and hold the organisation to account to making sure they can do the best they can for those people so they can go out and keep us all safe in what is an extremely challenging job. So that's my sort of summary, really. That's my takeaway, I think, John, from this, is that establishing staff engagement, but not just an annual survey, a sort of relentless commitment to it, can be a very challenging and humbling experience for the executive team. So they need support with that. But if you establish it early, you will make sure that you don't fall into the trap of presenting your commitment to wellbeing to the workforce, whilst that being seen as very remote rhetoric for what's actually happening in the workplace. Sometimes all that member of staff wants you to do at 3 a.m. in the morning, when they've just been to that really difficult job, is get the printer to work. That's my sort of summary, John.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. What you've been able to achieve with that, I guess, transparency driven by data is just fantastic. It gives that executive, i.e. you, and also your team and other executives the opportunity to understand what's actually happening at the face, which is just brilliant. So thank you so much, Andy. Next, we'll be hearing from across the ditch from where I am in Australia with Superintendent Mel Aitken from New Zealand Police. Mel is going to present on New Zealand Police prevention to our people. Mel.
Good afternoon and good morning and good evening and kia ora, and to our Australian colleagues, g'day. Look, I think it's, I feel somewhat privileged to be able to be responsible for leading both health and safety and wellness for New Zealand Police. So we have an organisation of over 14,000 employees, and for me, our team, we comprise 5 functions. So we look after health and safety, wellness, return to work, physical education, and a health clinic. So we're really about providing a holistic approach to the wellbeing and safety of our organisation. So just to provide a bit of history first, we were formerly called the Wellness and Safety Group, and we were very much compliance-focused, response-based. We had a strategy that supported that. Just to state though that our organisation, we've always been completely committed to physical safety, and wellbeing was predominantly focused on a response-based approach. We've actually in fact had a welfare service within the police for over 50 years, and it was traditionally more benevolent based, with staff that were sort of long-serving, operational, experienced in the field, welfare officers they were known as. There was no requirement for health qualifications, no professional code of practice or registration. So a review of the service recognised that our employees' needs had changed, which led to the professionalisation of the wellness advisor role, with the appointment of qualified health practitioners into every district who were better equipped to manage the growing complexity of our employees' needs. And more recently, we underwent a further review of our service delivery, which led to renaming ourselves as Safer People, a rebrand of our service line, our image, our intent, and our purpose. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and hopefully that works. Yeah, cool. So the operating model for New Zealand Police is very much about taking every opportunity to prevent harm in the community, preventing crime before it happens, and ultimately it's about making New Zealand a safer and better place to work and visit. We know that in order to achieve this though, our own people have to be fit and well and be in a position to bring their very best self to work. So we've adopted a holistic model for safety and wellbeing that underpins our new strategy, Te Whare Tapa Wha. So the tikanga Māori framework recognises that wellbeing and safety is like a house or a whare with 4 walls and its foundation. So wellbeing is multidimensional, and that each wall interconnects and contributes to the balance and the strength of the individual as a whole. So our connection with the whenua, or the land, that forms the foundation. So wellbeing for us comprises of the physical safety and wellbeing, the mental and emotional wellbeing, the family and social wellbeing, and then the spiritual wellbeing. So success for our people is much like our externally focused operating strategy. So it's the absence of physical or mental injury or illness to our people. So where proactive reporting, early intervention and uptake of prevention initiatives is high, and that everybody genuinely takes personal responsibility for their own wellbeing and safety. We do safety because it's the right thing to do. So with our new strategy and model for wellbeing, we're openly driven to address and reduce the stigma around mental health, and with the "it's okay to not be okay" statement at the front and centre of the strategy on our page that you can see there. Just take you into slide number 2. Yep. So breaking down the model to illustrate the interconnection between those 4 pillars, you'll see there that within each of the quadrants, so your physical, your mental and emotional, your family and social, and your spiritual, New Zealand Police, we provide a 3-pronged practice framework. so prevent, advise, respond, with initiatives, programs and policies that prevent harm to our people, that advise and educate them, and then respond, of course, when required. So for those of you that are looking at the slide, you may have already spotted the commonality across all the quadrants, and that's the Wellness Hub. And it's one of our driving force engines to enable the delivery of our strategy, which is now what I'd like to take you through and explain further on the following slides. So again, bear with me. Right, cool. So we have been really serious about driving prevention of wellbeing and safety in our people. So back in last year, 2019, we introduced a new senior position into the organisation, the Health Promotions Advisory Manager. Rank is Inspector, so it's a high level position. And alongside that, we've launched the New Zealand Police Wellness Hub. So the Hub is a digital platform, and it's designed to enhance employee performance, and of course the consequence of that is organisational performance. So the platform enables us to significantly invest in and drive bespoke information, education and tailored articles to enable our police employees to take personal responsibility for their health, their safety and their wellbeing, and that it's aligned with our four-wall wellbeing model approach. So in box number 1 there, you'll see the slide shows there's a laptop and a cell phone, and that's the real look and feel of our hub when you go into it. We make it accessible off both a police device and personal devices, and it's available not just to our employees but also to their family. With an organisation of over 14,000 employees, in less than a year of it going live, we've got over 6,000 employees that have opted into using it. So on registration to the hub, individuals will fill out a health questionnaire and they'll receive a personalised traffic light health profile, or what we call a scorecard. So based on the scorecard, a long-term behaviours model is then applied, which individualises the content that the user is then sent, and it focuses on things like education. So we've got thousands of articles, video logs, blogs, motivation, so there's challenges, and then rewards, so participation type rewards or prizes. If we move to box number 3 there, the hub, we use it to advertise upcoming health promotions, national health awareness campaigns such as Mental Health Awareness Week, which we're currently in, or police-related gamified challenges and initiatives designed for police, by police, to address and promote wellbeing. And then box number 4 down the bottom, so to address mental health stigma, you know, we've been really forthright and openly talking about mental health, and our own people have shared their personal stories and journeys. We know that there's nothing greater than the power of, say, a frontline member, whether it's a dog handler, whoever that might be, to talk about their own struggles, how they've coped, in order for others to actually feel safe about being able to speak up and not be stigmatised. We're able to customise the content on the hub to ensure relativity, and also ensure our team can reach out with information needed by our people, for our people, based on feedback, trends and data. So down the bottom there, you'll see that there's a series of tiles. They highlight some of the recent areas we've focused on, including the death of a colleague, coping with negative police media, delivering initiatives like our informal peer support program, Mate to Mate. Just take you to slide number 3. So within the hub, we provide challenges and goals to motivate and get our people taking responsibility for their own well-being. So this slide here shows you the range of current challenges or goals that employees can sign up for. So most of our challenges are designed to run over the course of 3 weeks or 21 days. And I know Jeff will support me here, knowing that for a habit or routine to be formed, it takes a good 3 weeks to create that habit. So in this example, I could select the mind, body and soul mental health challenge. I could then select when I want it to start. I could then choose what time of the day that I'd like to be sent the challenge to complete whatever that challenge is. At the end of the completing the challenge, I'd receive points which collectively can add up over time and then can be used to purchase rewards. So some of the challenges listed might be a bit hard for you to read on the screen, but include things like sleeping smarter, shift work sleeping, aspiring leaders, gratitude, sugar crash, digital detoxing, and charging through change. So to enable our leaders to have better conversations with their staff, teams will often pick one of those challenges or goals and kickstart a group challenge, using this as the basis for actually a deeper conversation to get people actually talking about wellness, health, and safety. So challenges can be timed to address organisational, national or global demands, such as COVID. With many staff working from home, we recognised a change in things like eating patterns had occurred and some poor diets had actually developed. So we had one of our physical education officers kick off a 10-week challenge to get people basically back on the wagon, for individuals and teams to achieve fitness goals, with leaderboard scores being published and participation prizes awarded during the initiative. Just going a little bit further into the hub. So if I decided maybe as an individual or as a team leader, I wanted to undertake or understand more about mindfulness as an example, then I can actually find a plethora of resources and articles that I can actually undertake. We even had one of our very own detectives provide interactive mindfulness sessions down the bottom there, which you'll see, which for staff to follow. So in my final slide here, it's just showing off a range of employee special offers or discounts. So these are generally discounts off health-related products and services, food, health-related equipment, and they're available to employees and friends and family that have signed up through the hub. So really that's just a brief overview, firstly of our strategy and how we got to where we got to, the model that we've adopted to support the wellbeing of our employees, and how the hub is the integral platform to help enable and deliver really proactive prevention initiatives for our people to remain fit for work and fit for life. Back to you, John.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was fantastic. The hub has certainly been something that other countries I know have been looking at for some time, and we've been able to pull it off in such a way that it's not just supporting the individual officer, but also their family, and reducing a lot of that stigma that goes along with seeking support by telling positive stories about people being able to recover and get back into the workforce. Thank you so much, Mel. Next and last is Annika Smit, PhD from the Police Academy of the Netherlands. Annika is presenting on resilience beyond recovery. Annika.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much for having me. Here it is 3 a.m. in the morning, so it's a bit early, so I'll have to use some tools that may have been presented so far. I'm working at Police Academy as a chair for research on resilience, and my actual job is to connect researchers as well and perform them. And I'm a biological psychologist by profession, and I've been working for the police since 2006 in the Netherlands. And what I would like to share with you is some thoughts that I have on what resilience is really about, and more specifically to come to a mechanism underneath all the different types of research that we've been done so far for the last decade. And what I'm not going to do is show you all the different intervention programs that we have in the Netherlands since 2010. But what I would like to show a bit of is the research lying underneath the different interventions. So I will start with a short overview on the research we've done so far, and also the mechanism and the definition that we use for resilience in order to be able to connect all these different types of angles you might use to have a look at resilience or resiliency. And a bit of the research projects, but that's just a snapshot. And I will go into a bit more detail about what the topic of current research is. And I will finish with a straightforward principle that is ready to use, which is not to say that it's easy to use, but it has kept coming up throughout the different research projects that we've been running. I will just share my screen with you. Now, what is resilience? What is it about? In our research, we look at resilience as performing successfully under critical circumstances. And there are two notes that I would like to point out here. The definition, performing successfully in critical circumstances, means that we focus on performance, which has a job component and of course a general health component as well. And we need to keep an eye on both, so also job performance. And this brings me to my second note. For each and every research endeavor that we undertake, we need to make explicit what successful performance actually means. Is it writing up a good police report, even though it's a very tiresome night shift? Or is it handling the building up of stress while being confronted with an angry husband? Or is it communicating clearly with citizens who are blaming the police for something that society is ashamed of? Or is it searching to find common grounds with a colleague who has very different ideas and beliefs? And it might be all of these together, but this surely has implications for how you research resilience and how the experiments are set up and what data need to be gathered and in what manner. And without an explicit performance goal, resilience doesn't really apply to anything tangible in real life. And I will get back on this performance goal alignment in a minute. And it's actually very connected to the engagement concept that Andy just talked about. And resilience is, of course, a very broad term, and we all know that it is used in many different ways in different types of studies. And in the Dutch police force, we've conducted many different experiments as well. And I will show you on the next slide. But before I go into that, how do we connect all these different angles of different types of research? In our police resilience studies in the Netherlands, one mechanism has proven to be suitable in all these different circumstances and is able to connect these different angles as well. And that is homeostasis. And homeostasis is the mechanism an open and composed system uses to maintain a certain function in interaction with a dynamic context. And coming back to the point I was making on the previous slide, performance needs to be made explicit in order to guide an organism or system in a certain direction. And this is in line with the principle of homeostasis, which is also directed towards a function, or in other words, a goal. So homeostasis appears to be a very suitable underlying theoretical framework to use. I'm just going to the next slide. What we've researched so far in the Netherlands in the last decade is on different angles, which I just told you, on the human body, but also groups of people. And what we've studied is the biological, the psychological, the moral, and the social. And we've done some different types of research, before job performance, for instance. And we've done some effect studies on resilience training, which included mindfulness and tactical breathing and stuff like that. And what we saw was that sometimes it doesn't really improve general health, but it might improve performance, and that may improve general health on the long run. And we're still investigating that as well. but also VR, virtual reality studies, in which we try to map how job performance increases if you have to go to a site which is unknown to you, but you have the ability or the opportunity to have a look at the surroundings in virtual reality. And we test cortisol levels and stress levels while being on the scene with these investigators or police officers on the grounds. And what we've seen so far is that it helps to get you familiarized in a setting or circumstances that you don't know beforehand. But we've also done some general health and well-being studies, for instance, PTSD studies. And we're actually now conducting a study on how support dogs might be helpful for police officers who are diagnosed with PTSD and are not really helped by the regular interventions. Also group dynamics. We evaluate interventions, for instance, on debriefing, but also moral dilemma training and stuff like that, focus groups. But also integrity, for instance, misconduct and how the police organization is doing the disciplinary investigations. So this is just a snapshot of the different types of researches that we've been doing. And if you're interested in this, you can have a look at the Police Academy website and you can download the book for free, which entails the first 5 years of research on this resilience program. Now, I will just share with you what the current research topic is all about. And actually, what we try to do is test how the homeostatic principle underlying the different angles of our research agenda can be tested. So really the research question is, how do the biological, the moral and the social integrate into increasingly higher levels of homeostasis? Like, how does a cell survive in its tissue surroundings up until how do people connect to others in a social group? And how do moral processes have, or spiritual processes have a place in this? Connecting all the different results of the research projects that I just showed you on the previous slide, I found one very remarkable thing over and over again, and this I would like to share with you. Resilience, first of all, seemed to be all about switching mechanisms, from closing up while building a shield against horror and threat, for instance, to opening up in order to empathetically get the moral dimension of a complicated social problem, for instance. So knowing how to switch back and forth from closing to opening up seemed to help the people that I was studying so closely for all these years. But to what end do people open up and close? In each and every research project, and this is the second key, this leads back to what the people involved were trying to accomplish. And this is really connected to the engagement part that Andy was talking about. It's not just the physical condition or the mental condition that's really important here. It is important, of course, but it's also about moral reasoning. And I will show you just the next slide. It's not just the physical rebound or the mental toughness, but the system also works in order to get something done, in order to achieve something that has moral value. And it's not just from physical towards moral, but also the other way around. If the moral purpose is hampered, this eventually yields to biologically measurable health problems as well. So the human system works to keep higher order purpose or goals in trying to maintain a certain balance with its surroundings. And moral reasoning doesn't just apply to religious beliefs or anything, but it's about the principles people use in life in order to accomplish the very best things they would like to accomplish. So it doesn't have to be religious, but it's about principles and guiding things towards what you want to achieve in life.
Annika?
Yeah?
Sorry, can I just jump in there? Would it be okay if you could summarise, I guess, with one big takeaway for us from everything you've been able to say so far?
Yeah. I was just going into that. So the values one wants to achieve in life, these are pivotal. And this brings me to my final note, which is about the not so easy to accomplish, but in essence, very straightforward principle. If you want to stay resilient beyond mere recovery, you do not focus per se on balance, because this is an empty endeavor. You need to calibrate your system in line with what you want to achieve most of all, and keep your balance in connection with those around you for the sake of this purpose.
Thank you so much, Annika. Thank you. Right, I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds to summarise all that, which is a pretty incredible task, but here we go. Firstly, we heard from Dr. Katrina Sanders about
It's Jeff. If you need a minute or two more than that, please, because we can't rush this. This has been awesome and brilliant. So when I say take your time, not 20 minutes, but like, it's all yours, brother.
Thanks so much, Jeff. We're really lucky to have each of the speakers here today, and we kicked off firstly with Dr. Katrina Sanders from the Australian Federal Police, and talking a lot about the impacts of stress from long-term crises and how to combat this. Talking about it especially from the Australian perspective, when we've recently had the Black Summer fires over the December, actually leading early from September last year, but really heightened during the December, January, February period, and then pretty much straight into the pandemic. The Australian Federal Police have now been on our front lines basically since September last year in a heightened period, including also what they do on a daily basis. So running through what she looked at from the primary, secondary and tertiary approach was really fantastic, and I think we can learn a lot from it. Then we had Chief Constable Andy Rhodes talking to us about Oscar Killer and the National Police Wellbeing Service, really connecting the executive with the front line and academia, those three dots that he highlighted, that if you can bring together, can give both transparency, but also a knowledge and a research base that ensures that your delivery is going to be evidence-based and achieve outcomes that you can put your hand on your heart and say are going to do the best as per what's around, not just in the UK from Andy's perspective, but what's the best practice around the world. Please have a look at the Oscar Kilo website. It's really fantastic, and it really does show a lot more of what's being done. And you can also actually jump on some of the programs that they run, including some of the elements recently about sleep and sleep hygiene, which obviously is a key issue that Andy highlighted. Next, we heard from Superintendent Mel Aitken, who spoke about the New Zealand Police Safe People 2023 program. A key of which was the wellbeing or wellness hub for individual owners, and responsibility for the key 4 areas that they need to have as part of their life and also their families. And it was really fantastic to hear that the wellbeing hub is not just open to the individual, but also to the family, including a multitude of areas that really I think we've seen through these last couple of days are key to actually ensuring that the individual officer and also their family are supported in the resilience project that we're all going through. And finally, we just heard from Dr. Annika Smith, who's up at 3 a.m. or now almost 4 a.m. Thank you again, Annika, and thank you, Andy, for joining us at a very, very, very early hour, who after a decade of intense research through the Dutch Police Resilience Program are now exploring new scientific grounds. And I really like that homeostasis concept around making sure that you're continuously calibrating yourself, and I guess in that instance your family, to be able to go through what you all collectively go through on a daily basis, which is a considerable amount of stress, and building the resilience to achieve really long-term careers, not just something where you can be burnt out after a couple of years, because that does no one any good at all. So from me, as a moderator of this, thank you so much for attending the innovative approaches to police resilience and wellbeing. Again, please go back to the website, resilientsymposium.org, to see more about the speakers from today, and also to connect through to their relevant organisations, the book that Aitken mentioned, and a bunch of other resources that can help you be better at what you do to make us all safer. Thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it.